Hello, good evening and welcome to Business 7. My name is Philippus Osiku, your host. I'm not alone, I'm joined by my colleague and editor of Business 7, Jo Mary. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. It's a jam-packed show as always.
What can we expect on the show?
Okay, of course, we've got the big guru, Theo Klein himself, economist of Simone Storm, who's going to elaborate on the latest growth figures, economic growth figures, and quite a few other very interesting topics too, which we'll disclose a bit later. And then, as usual, we're looking at business highlights in Africa over the past week. Also, a short piece on the US Vice President Kamala Harris's visit to some African countries, and then a look at the troubles that Nigeria is experiencing in terms of its currency.
For that and more, stay tuned.
Connection. It's in the human touch, the feeling of belonging. It inspires us and empowers us, creates clarity from complexity. It starts new conversations, unlocks the power of advice, and makes an impact on your life. At Alex Forbes, we pioneer insight to provide you with advice that connects your decisions of today to your impact tomorrow.
Philip, before we start with our local content, let's take a quick look first at the stories that made business highlights headlines in Africa over the past week.
Here are 5 stories that made business headlines in sub-Saharan Africa this week. Botswana will take a 24% stake in Belgian gem processing firm HB Antwerp, President Mokgweetsi Masisi said on Monday, in a move that might start to loosen De Beers' grip on the country's diamond industry. De Beers jointly owns Africa's largest diamond producer with Botswana, which has threatened to walk away from talks over renewing a sales and marketing agreement if it does not get a bigger share of Botswana's output. Kamala Harris announced several initiatives to boost U.S. trade and investment with Tanzania during a visit on Thursday.
One, the Export-Import Bank will sign an MOU with Tanzania, which will facilitate up to $500 million in U.S. exports to Tanzania.
The U.S. Vice President's African trip aims to strengthen ties with the continent, where China and Russia increasingly hold sway. China Energy Engineering Corp has proposed a 1,000-megawatt floating solar plant on Zimbabwe's Kariba Dam at a cost of nearly $1 billion, documents showed on Monday. Floating solar power stations are becoming an increasingly attractive option as developers seek to avoid using up large spaces and competing land use interests. China Energy's proposal, made to state-owned Zimbabwe Power Company and a private consortium, would see about 1.8 million solar panels installed. Nigeria's outgoing government has recommended that the new administration of President-elect Bola Tinubu give public sector workers pay rises after removing a fuel subsidy in June, Labour Minister Chris Ngige said on Tuesday. Economists say the fuel subsidy is an unsustainable drag on public finances, but Nigerian governments have failed to remove it because of fierce opposition from citizens. And finally, a video of 9 miners unexpectedly escaping a collapsed gold mine as onlookers cry out in joy has gone viral in Democratic Republic of Congo. Mining accidents are rife in the Central African country, but the video, which has been verified, showed a rare happy ending to an often tragic story.
Philip, the Namibia Statistics Agency released the latest GDP figures last week. Very interesting stuff there.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Obviously, the economy growing by 4.6% in 2022, so great news for Namibia.
Yes, indeed, very, very good news. What's important to remember, though, is that the growth is coming off a very low base. We're still in recovery mode, but let's not waste any time on that. Let's speak to the guru. We had Theo Klein, economist of Simone Storm, in the studio with us.
the Namibian economy grew by 4.6% in 2022. To expand more on this, I'm joined by Theo Klein. He's the economist at Storm. Welcome, Theo.
Morning, Philip. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, what did you make of Namibia's economic performance in 2022, and what are Storm growth prospects for the domestic economy for 2023?
So, Philip, we were actually surprised that it was not as high as, we forecasted a much higher figure. But with knowing the NSA, there'll probably, most likely be data revisions, and it will probably be to the upside, at least we hope so. We forecasted 5.1% growth. So I think from most other local research firms, we were most aggressive. But it's only because of the performance we've seen in the first 3 quarters that came in above 5%, some was 6%. So we just did not see the fourth quarter really slowing down significantly to lower the annual average for the 4 quarters. So that's how we got to 5.1%. What is interesting though is if we look at real GDP, so GDP is price times quantity, if we simplify it, but in this case we keep price constant. So you only look at what happened to quantity, because that really tells us were people more productive, did they produce more, did they make more things basically. And if we look at the real GDP measure, we see that only 41% of all the sectors that make up our economy have recovered to 2019 levels. So we sort of use 2019's real GDP as a pre-COVID or pre-pandemic level. And only 41% have reached that level. So we still have majority of our sectors that still need to catch up. And some of them are fairly close, roughly 80% of 2019's levels. So I think maybe if we can see this momentum continuing into 2023, it might be that more sectors and majority of our sectors have reached pre-pandemic levels.
Yeah. So as we are upbeat about the economy in 2023, but it comes with risk as well. And one of them is the rising interest rates. What did you make of South Africa's decision to hike the repo rate by 50 basis points, and what does it mean for Namibia?
So we were very surprised at that one, Philip. To be honest, we also were of the consensus view that they will likely only hike by 25 basis points. But, this is what we've been saying since last year. Our inflation is driven by things beyond human control, and interest rates do nothing to them. But if we increase interest rates, we entice foreigners to keep their money within the country, within South Africa, and in that way you prevent foreign outflows, and you maintain the value of the rand. Why is this so important? Because Namibia and South Africa import most of what we consume. So because of the high import requirement, a weak rand exchange rate is very inflationary for us. So if you can increase the interest rate, you make the rand more attractive. So, and that's what we've seen. After SARB hiked by 50 basis points, we saw the rand move to levels we've seen in January last. So, and I checked this morning as well, the rand is still below 18 against the US dollar. So I think that in itself will be good for our inflation figures if we can keep the rand there. Now you'll only keep the rand there, Philip, if you continue hiking. So we are of the view that SARB will not continue hiking rates. What that means for Namibia, we're not entirely too sure. We know that of the 5 MPC members, not all are in favor of continuing to hike rates aggressively in Namibia. So, at the last meeting, 2 members were in favor of not hiking at all, whereas 3 ultimately voted for the 25 basis points hike, which they did in February. So we have seen Bank of Namibia deviating from SARB, so not just sort of following them blindly what they're doing. So it's difficult to say, Philip, but at this point in time, we are forecasting another 50 basis points hike by the mid of 2023. But we see Bank of Namibia hiking by 25 in April and then another 25 in June. And then at this point in time, we see the repo rate then remaining at 7.5 until the end of the year after the June hike. So that's sort of our view at the moment. But what the last year has shown us is that these things are so quick to change. Inflation is still not coming down in the US. That means the Fed will continue hiking. And if we want to keep the rand at a strong level to contain inflation to some extent, then SARB will have to follow the Fed in the US. And therefore it can mean that it just depends on what the sentiment is amongst the MPC here in Namibia. But I don't see them just sort of blindly following South Africa anymore, as it maybe appeared in the first half of last year.
Yeah.
Philip, you also asked Theo some very interesting questions, not only on the import bill, but on interest rates. And I loved his explanation. Let's hear what he has to say.
You spoke about how the rising interest rates plays a role in strengthening the rand, and obviously one of the risks to domestic growth is also Namibia's high import bill. The latest trade stats indicated that 8.5 billion import bill was mainly driven by petroleum oils. And we have heard the big oil producing countries announcing that they will be cutting production. Maybe if you can explain to us what is driving Namibia's import bill, and how will the cut in production of oil impact the local oil market?
So as you mentioned about the oil, I think it's sad to say oil is down over 7% yet to date since the start of this year, but we haven't seen local fuel price cuts because of the weak rand. And now they're cutting production, so that means oil prices will continue to increase. So I think that is also a risk for us, and petroleum is the single biggest import product. So that is key in inflating our import bill. And I think that will just continue to get bigger in the next couple of months. The other big import products, Philip, is maybe we can talk about fertilizers and animal feed. So farmers tell me that, before the pandemic, or before the war in Ukraine rather, they used to pay about 200, 250 Namibian dollars per bag. At the moment, they're paying over 600 Namibian dollars per bag. So they are still paying very expensive prices at the moment, and we don't make any of our fertilizers ourselves. So I guess that's why you also have all these green hydrogen pilot projects that are now looking to produce their own fertilizers. So I think that will also be one of the things continuing to inflate our import bill. And then just with general merchandise goods, I've seen commodity prices increase significantly last year. In 2023, thus far, they've sort of been on a flat to negative trend, but it still remains at elevated levels. Together with the weak rand, we see prices still remaining fairly expensive, from furniture to alcohol, and even some food products as well that we import. So I think the biggest risk for our import bill is the fact that commodity prices are still at elevated levels, and then you have this weak rand exchange rate. And we don't see that changing anytime soon. So we expect Namibia to continue recording trade deficits, probably for every single month for the rest of this year at least. And if we look at one of the ways you calculate GDP, that will be negative for that GDP calculation.
Yeah, and looking at our neighboring country, South Africa, with the whole power crisis, you did some research there on how it is affecting our exports to South Africa. So how is the load shedding in South Africa affecting our export, and how could it also affect imports from South Africa to Namibia?
So I think, Philip, look, because of load shedding, their ports are not working at optimal levels. So what we're seeing is that more landlocked Southern African countries are now transporting their cargo to Namibia, because the ports in Durban, for example, can't work optimally anymore. So you also have problems with South African railway. There's theft and vandalism of the railway network, which means their trains also can't operate at full capacity. So that means more cargo is coming to Namibia, which then is recorded as an import, but most likely we just export it for them, so that then benefits our exports. So to that extent, I would say Namibians are actually in a good position to take advantage of the situation in South Africa, that they can now steal market share from Durban's port, for example, that they now get more cargo from other countries and we export it for them. In that way, not only will local transport companies or truck companies benefit, it will also benefit Namport. And we've already seen Namport recording record profits last year as a result of more cargo going their way. And I think that will just continue to benefit Namport as well. So I think that's one of the things that we see as a positive for Namibia, that the transport sector really is in a good position to take advantage of problems in South Africa. Of course, this also means that more trucks will be driving on our roads, and I think that's also why you still have the Road Fund Agency being very serious in introducing toll gates in Namibia, because they obviously maybe also foresee that more trucks will be driving on our roads, and that will cause, it will increase the need for maintenance of our roads and so forth.
Yeah. We'll go for a short break and then we'll continue with our discussion.
In the following piece that we're going to take a look at, Philip, was provided by Reuters, and I loved them referring to it as America being on the charm offensive, of course trying to sort of get a little bit of the stage back from China when it comes to Africa. And that, of course, refers to the visit of the US Vice President Kamala Harris to some African countries. Let's take a look at the Reuters report.
African ideas and innovations will shape the future of the world. So said US Vice President Kamala Harris as she delivered a speech to thousands of young Ghanaians on Tuesday. Her three-country African tour, starting in Ghana, is part of a charm offensive by Washington aimed at countering the growing influence of China and Russia on the continent.
This continent, of course, has a special significance for me personally, as the first Black Vice President of the United States of America.
Harris delivered her speech in front of the Black Star Gate in Accra, a monument built on the site where Ghana declared its independence from Britain in 1957. She cited examples of African innovations introduced before such services were available in the US, including pioneering mobile phone payments in Kenya and healthcare deliveries by drone in Rwanda.
And so to you I say, it is your spark, your creativity, and your determination that will drive the future.
Harris also addressed the empowerment of women, noting that though women grow the majority of food on the continent, they are less likely to own the land they farm. Empowering women, she said, would benefit not only themselves, but also the entire economy.
I am optimistic about the future of the world because of you. The woman who will shatter every glass ceiling. The entrepreneur who will identify the next digital breakthrough. The activist who will fight for the dignity of every human being. Students and scientists, athletes and artists, farmers and fishers, and the young innovators who will solve problems that we haven't yet identified with solutions we can't even yet imagine.
Harris, whose trip also takes in Zambia and Tanzania, said there are two other areas where the US would work with African partners. They are digital inclusion and good governance and democracy. The latter she described as a work in progress, including in my own country, an apparent allusion to the turbulence and at times chaos seen in US politics and elections in recent years.
Thank you so much to FNB for this opportunity. Thank you so much to FNB. What an experience. I never got to do shopping in 5 minutes, but Look at all this.
It's time to say goodbye. We had a great program. Thank you for joining us. Philip, we're playing out with a Reuters report on the woes of the Nigerian Naira. It just doesn't seem to end. But for us, for now, thank you very much for watching and goodbye.
Nigeria's Naira currency dropped to a record low of 465 per dollar on Monday, data from Refinitiv showed. That's as traders await the outcome of Friday's central bank foreign exchange auction. The Naira later recovered to trade at 461 to the dollar. Soaring inflation and an unstable currency have been hampering Africa's biggest economy as it tries to recover from the global health crisis. The Naira has fallen to successive lows due to dollar scarcity coupled with central bank adjustments to manage a backlog in demand for foreign exchange. On Friday, the central bank held a bi-weekly retail auction for people or businesses who need dollars to settle offshore trade-related obligations. The results are expected this Friday. Traders expect unsuccessful bidders to Friday's auction to channel their demand to informal sources. That's prompted the Naira to weaken to 750 against the dollar on the parallel black market. Nigeria's central bank is battling to manage liquidity on the interbank market while at the same time intervene on the foreign exchange market to prop up liquidity. It's been adjusting rates to manage demand against its level of foreign reserves.
Every day, you make choices that make you legendary. Journey together with us on the path to securing your legacy as a member of the League of Legends. With the Select Platinum Bundle Fee Premium Bank offering, you will access tools that will enable you to thrive. If you earn 850,000 Namibian dollars per annum or more, you can apply for this offering today via bankvinted.com.na for only 447 Namibian dollars per month. Bank Vinted, a member of Capricorn Group.
NMH Ad 1 brings you news from all across Namibia. If you would like to feature your brand or campaign on this platform, contact nmh1@synergy.com.na. NMH Ad 1, your lunchtime news companion.
Connection. It's in the human touch, the feeling of belonging. It inspires us and empowers us, creates clarity from complexity. It starts new conversations, unlocks the power of advice, and makes an impact on your life. At Alex Forbes, we pioneer insight to provide you with advice that connects your decisions of today to your impact tomorrow.